Hi, everyone. All right, let's see. Cool. Great to be here. I kept telling Errol and the team, I tried to do stuff like this 5 years ago. It was pretty limited in the number of people who were attending. That's when I started full-time in the industry. So it's great to see, especially like for folks who are developers and a bit more technical and profile to be in events like this. So yeah, kudos to Errol and Murat and the whole team. I'm going to be talking about, obviously zero knowledge and Web3 mass adoption, and with the caveat that it's not just about scalability. I think there's a whole lot more that zero knowledge can add, as I'm sure was covered in some of the prior talks. Before I get started, can I get a raise of hands of people who are not from Turkey or in Turkey right now? Who's international? Okay, cool. All right, so predominantly Turkish audience. Good to know. I'll try and dial down Turkish-related content a bit. So as I said, the point of my speech is about how zero knowledge can enable mass adoption in Web3. And some of you might be even asking, like, everyone's talking about Web3 crypto blockchain. Why do we even need mass adoption? Isn't it already here? I actually disagree with that. So if we look at Web 3.0 today, or crypto or blockchain, right, it has a lot of names. Today, what we're seeing is a small number of very large users and a lot of money, right? There's just tons of dollars sloshing around, a lot of people speculating on how the future is going to be. And frankly, you might disagree with this, because when you look at news headlines, or even if you walk around Istanbul, which is still perplexing to me, like there's so many billboards from various crypto exchanges, or look at just international numbers, like there's hundreds of millions of people using these things and buying and selling. Even like things more sophisticated and technical, like MetaMask, which is an Ethereum wallet, or even if you look at DeFi users, and this is on-chain data, right? It's like going up and to the right, with more than 4 million, maybe 4.5 million users, still growing. But when you think about it, when you take a step back, this is all about speculation, as I said, right? This is entirely people buying and selling, whether it's tokens or NFTs. And there's data to support this hypothesis. If you look at start drilling down to the numbers, the top two applications in terms of number of users, or in this case, actually also this is number of wallets. And I don't need to tell folks in this room probably that people usually have more than one, sometimes double-digit number of wallets, so it's much less user numbers. But here you see user numbers of MakerDAO, which is a popular stablecoin and project, and Aave, which is a lending marketplace. There's less than 100,000 users, maybe around 100,000 now. These graphs are from a while ago. And these, I would argue, are the only apps or the top apps that people use, not for the sole purpose of speculating and buying and selling. Those in the room might, if you've looked at these graphs, might object and say, no, you're wrong. Like, look at Compound. It has way more users, more than 300,000. But if you look at this chart, my point still stays, because this huge wall over here is when they did the first liquidity mining program, for those of you in the room who might remember. So if you take that out, they're still under 100,000 users. So unfortunately, as I said, there is these like huge whales, as they say, that have been, just are the only ones that are using Web3 for the purpose it's built, right? Not just for speculating, not just for buying and selling tokens and NFTs, but for actual value add uses. And my point being, just speculating isn't adoption. I don't think anyone in this room is here for the world to be flush with tokens and like people buying and selling and getting rug pulled the whole time. I think we're all here. I know, like specifically in this room, and I know there's other conferences where people might disagree, but I know in this room, we're all here to build value add services for sustainable products that that are used by people all around the world. So my point is, like, how do we get from this Web3, right, to this type of a Web3 where, yes, fortunately or unfortunately, we still live in a capitalist world. There's going to be money still is at the center of our days, but we need a whole lot more users that are benefiting from some of the value add that can be provided by these decentralized protocols. So how do we get there, and what's the role of zero knowledge in this? How can it enable this mass adoption? I want to get one thing out of the way. Scalability is there, right? That is one of the three things that I'm going to cover. And I'm saying I'm going to get it out of the way. I'm not going to talk too much about it, because it's well known at this point, again, especially by people in this room, zero knowledge can enable transactions with infinitesimal fees that are close to zero without trading off decentralization, right? And for those of you who may not be aware or know more about like how zero knowledge enables this, the basic premise is, if you take a step back, blockchains are all like databases, right? They're databases that are distributed across multiple nodes around the world. They're the exact same copy of the database. And how they work today is, you know, once someone updates an instance of the database, everyone else has the economic incentives to copy the exact same thing. But there's so much redundant computation and processes that are happening there because, you know, someone's updated the database, everyone else is doing the same thing, and that's why, you know, ultimately we're limited right now by transaction throughput and they're expensive and whatnot. What zero knowledge says is, or zero knowledge proof technology says is, hey, the first person that updates the database, they can actually pass around the cryptographic proof that says the computation that I've done to update the database from state S to state S prime basically is true, right? And you can just get this proof and trust that what I've done is true without having to do the entire computation yourself. So that's why, in essence, and you know, there's a whole lot more obviously, and I'm not a cryptographer, so I'm not going to be able to do it justice if we start digging deeper. But in essence, zero knowledge enables blockchains and decentralized protocols to get much more scalable without trading off their essential property, which is decentralization. And there's a lot of projects that are working on this, right? You see some of the layer 2 rollup projects here that are building on Ethereum. Mina itself, which is one of the projects, or the project that I'm working on, is also targeting this. But I want to take a pause there because there is like this sort of a vision in the space where, oh my God, everyone is just waiting for cheap transactions. When they're here, we're going to get mass adoption, and everyone's going to be happy. The world is going to be a beautiful place, butterflies everywhere, right? I don't think that's true, unfortunately. And I want to speak a bit from experience here. So, you know, for those of you who don't know me, I've been in the space for a fair bit, counting 7 years now. Started back in 2015 with a brief stint at Ripple. Then I was at Coinbase for over 2 years, and then I've been at O1 Labs, which is, as I mentioned, working on Mina protocol for over 3 years. And I feel like I've heard a bunch of stuff at this point. Like when I started, it was, we need easy programmability, right? Bitcoin doesn't work. The minute we get easy developer tooling and programmability, everything is going to be happy and butterflies. We got Ethereum in 2015 at launch, or 2016, I forget, right? But you know, that has not been the case. Then it was all about, well, these are very volatile currencies. We need stable money, right? If dollars, liras, whatever were be able to be put on blockchains, then everyone would be happy and butterflies all around. Well, we got things like USDC, Tether, whatnot. That has not been the case, right? Then it was like, well, these transactions are super expensive. We need cheap transactions. Well, now, like for the past few years, we've had things like Polygon and, you know, many other layer ones that actually do provide cheap transactions, and still we haven't been able to go beyond pure speculation. Then it was fast transactions. We've got things like Avalanche, still not there. Then it was, well, UX sucks. No one wants to use MetaMask. Well, Coinbase just launched actually a pretty cool thing where like you can now use dApps from their like main Coinbase application. It's got some very cool cryptography on their multi-party computation. I've used it. It works pretty seamless, good UX. Still, we don't have mass adoption. So what do people want? Why would they even consider using crypto, blockchain, Web3, right? It's pretty simple. People want something valuable without compromising basic properties. You know, that's in real life, when you think about it, that's why people line up for certain things, right? Whether they want to buy food somewhere, or whether they're going to a cool restaurant or a concert, or whether they want to buy an iPhone and they line up on Apple stores, right? And they're not compromising things other than just paying for whatever the service or the product is worth. And there actually is value today in crypto and blockchains, right? There are some value add services, like whether you think like NFTs, whether they're profile pictures or art or gaming stuff. You know, some people do get value out of it. Or whether it's DeFi applications, right? You can actually get some loans from wherever you are around the world without necessarily having to compromise a lot of stuff. But the one thing remains that today, everything you do on a blockchain is public forever for everyone to see. And that's one of our main thesis as a project, is why we have not yet seen mainstream adoption, because let's go back to first principles, right? Like if you think about the real world, basic case, right? You go to a bar, right? And I know, like, for example, I grew up in Turkey. This doesn't happen usually unless you're under 15 or something. You're able to sneak in. But I live in the US now, and it's pretty stringent. You go to a bar, everyone does identity checks to prove that you're over 21 in the case of US. And what happens there, you don't hand over a copy of your ID or your entire identity information. There's a guy or a gal who looks at your ID and sees, compares your photograph and looks at it, and the date is correct and the ID is mostly correct, and you can still fake it, but and they give you back your ID, right? No one holds on to your entire set of like this is a transaction, but no one knows this transaction happened. Like someone you meet 3 days after this, when you talk to them, they don't know you went to X bar and like had your ID checked, and this is what your identity information is. Unfortunately, that's what's happening on blockchains today, right? Everything you do, again, forever is public for anyone to see. And that's why, in essence, we're not seeing, whether it's DeFi applications or games or art projects or DAOs, be able to take in a lot more information from users, whether it's information they have on Web3 already or on Web2, and be able to do more intelligent things with it. So what we need to do is we need to somehow find a way to block and privatize all of this information. And instead of sharing your data, you have to basically, attest is like one keyword that we've been working on. You need to be able to attest to your data. Because if you can attest to your data, and as it was in the case of you going into a bar, then you can basically say, hey, bar or counterparty, whatever do you want to prove about me, right? Do you want to prove that I have a credit score that's above some score? Or do you want to prove that I have at least X amount of salary? Or that I am a member of a DAO or a group or whatever, like I'm a member of a club or a nonprofit organization. Or that I have a CryptoPunk, that's number XYZ, but I don't have to disclose to you what my address is. Or that I bought Bitcoin in 2014, because everyone can say I bought Bitcoin in 2014, but you never know. Like the number of people I've met that still don't have much idea about blockchain, but somehow bought Bitcoin in 2014, maybe 2008, right before the blockchain was launched, is actually more than I would have loved to see. But the point remains that thanks to zero knowledge technology, you can actually attest to things about yourself without going full open kimono and like sharing, basically saying, giving away their entire life. And that's what people want. Like people don't want to compromise on their personal privacy, on what everyone else can see, and be able to access these services. So we believe, whether you call it attestations or private data or whatever else, right? Where users can share data from anywhere privately, including their Web2 sources, because zero knowledge in a very creative way also enables, and this is a core piece of the thing that we're building, also enables you to pull in data from any other Web2 service, whether it's your bank or your social media account or whatever, and prove that you've actually pulled that information from that place. And interact intelligently with dApps and replace what I call fascist institutions that right now are also in between users and the blockchain, because today if you want to get any sort of privacy, you have to give your data to an institution, and maybe they zero knowledge your information, but then again you're at the behest of these institutions with zero knowledge. And this is yet another thing that Mina is working on. There is one last thing we believe people want, right? People like to see cool things. Right? Oh, sorry. Before that, this is just, by the way, I forgot to mention a brief, example of some of the institutions that we're working with to work on the data attestation stuff, where whether it's a browser like Brave or a Oracle service like Dia, or Sysmo is an identity initiative on the Ethereum land right now, but they're working with us, with Mina, to share information in a more attestation way, as opposed to like sharing your entire sets of information. So the next thing I was going to mention is that this is not it, right? People also get in line about cool stuff, like whether this is like think of concerts or entertainment. People actually do get excited and get in line when there's new stuff that they're excited about, and we have seen this in our industry, right? I don't know who remembers CryptoKitties, but back in end of 2017, suddenly everyone was like, this is actually fun, right? You can debate how fun it was or not, but like there were quite a lot of people that made it into the news. This is from BBC, where people were just playing around with these cats and like mating them and like having new cats and whatnot. So people thought it was cool, and this was actually enabled by one of the first innovations we got in our space, smart contract properties, right? And it did enable a whole lot of other things, right? NFTs, as I just mentioned, is one of them. DAI, which is a stablecoin, as most of you might know. It's a collateralized algorithmic stablecoin that's entirely decentralized. That is cool, right? That has never happened before. Whoop. Compound is a decentralized money market. Uniswap, automated market making. That was, as far as I know, was just a hypothetical thing in the financial services industry before, but now it's real and it's used by a lot of people. A lot of money goes through. Friends with Benefits is an example of a DAO. So like this innovation of smart contracts actually enabled a lot of cool stuff. And it's a small number of people, but some people have lined up to use these services. We believe zero-knowledge technology is akin to smart contracts in what it can enable. And there are some examples that are starting to happen. One of them is this game called Dark Forest. I'm not sure if many people have heard of this, but this got launched about a year ago. And it's basically a real-time strategy game like Age of Empires or Red Alert or like traditional stuff, but it's entirely on-chain. Then it's deployed and no one can stop it and no one can change its rules. That's quite in contrast to other real-time strategy games, some of the ones that I mentioned, where a company controls it, they can change the rules, they can stop. World of Warcraft is another example where there have been a lot of issues with gamers wanting to do something else, but the company or the game developer not wanting to allow it. Whereas in the case of Dark Forest, one other interesting thing is how it evolved is first people, like actual human beings, were playing it. But then because it's entirely open source and anyone can tap into it, now it's basically become unplayable by any real person. And it's only developers who can write algorithms to most efficiently play this game that are competing with each other. Debatable, right, whether that's something you want in a game. But I think it's fairly fair to say that this is unique and this got a lot of people excited. We're seeing similar stuff in MENA. Like we have just started launching our developer toolkit. So we're starting to see people innovate on things like derivation of a mastermind-like game. There's a company called Parcel who's doing real estate model predictions using certain machine learning algorithms. They're using our toolkit Snarky.js to do more advanced machine learning proving on chain. Snickerdoodle is like an identity/data marketplace initiative where they're trying to give you more chances to monetize your data in a private way. So they're doing some interesting things. So my point is, new experiences, cool new stuff also gets people excited. Again, to the extent they provide value. But these are like literally things that were not possible before. We saw the same thing with the internet back 20 years ago. We saw the same thing with smart contracts. We believe we're seeing the same things with zero knowledge. Here's some other projects other than MENA that are working on this. CirCom is an SDK, zero knowledge SDK on Ethereum. Dark Forest is built using CirCom. And then Cairo is the development toolkit of Starknet, which is a layer 2 rollup on Ethereum. So yeah, I think zero knowledge is this thing where it actually is, this is a saying that I love, it's, maybe you can call it a bullet maker, where it's a technology that enables a lot of new features and things and no compromise environments to become possible such that we get closer to and make leaps and bounds to Web3 mass adoption. And this is one thing I want to emphasize, like, as I said in the previous few slides before, up until now, the industry has been like searching for this silver bullet, right? Where, it's stable coins or it's fast transactions. Like there was this meme, like institutions are coming and everyone's going to adopt crypto, right? There is no silver bullet. This is a fairly complex bottoms-up industry. We need a lot of lead bullets. And zero knowledge, we believe, is a fundamental technology that enables a lot of lead bullets. So yeah, this is what we want to enable, whether it's with MENA or other projects. And again, I think it's just going to be a whole plethora of them. There's going to be a lot of different projects and different technologies that enable a lot of cool new stuff to bring a lot of people to the space such that we actually provide value add and sustainable services for the many, for everyone, not just for a few large whales. That, I believe, is the end of my talk. There's a lot of QR codes here if you want to go to them. This is about ZK apps, which is the entire application framework I mentioned on Mina. There is a educational program for developers for building ZK apps. That's, if you want to apply, if you're a developer, do it fast. Last 2 weeks, I believe, before applications close. We're hiring at O1 Labs. And then if anyone wants to engage or talk to me privately, that's the link to my Twitter. So yeah, dinlediğiniz için teşekkür ederim. Is there time for questions? Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, if there's any time for questions, happy to take.
Yeah, thank you very
any.
much for that talk, Emre. It's really nice to hear your perspective on things. We should open up. Well, we have the first question here.
Thank you for your talk. What types of application do you think it's easier to get an end user to feel the power of zero knowledge?
Yeah, so there's two ways to look at this, right? And I kind of tried to articulate that as well. One of them is, as I mentioned, there is already some value in the existing, I believe mostly the DeFi space today, right? Because it is pretty new to be able to engage in financial services from anywhere around the world, right? Today, if you wanted to borrow money from a bank, you have to be a resident of that country, you have to have a bank account, you have to have all these things. Whereas in the DeFi land today, you can, as someone anywhere around the world, go to any of the DeFi lending protocols and borrow money or lend money. The flip side is, right, you have to have collateralized, you have to over-collateralize your position, so you have to have money. But with zero knowledge, I believe one of the things that's really powerful is in the normal world, you get underwritten, right? Like you don't have to have money, or you can still be over collateralized, but you can apply, and the banks or the financial service provider looks at your qualities, whether it's your salary or the amount of money you have in your bank account or your credit score or whatever, and they lend you money, right? The same thing, I believe, thanks to zero knowledge functionality, can start happening with DeFi, where you can prove to a DeFi lending applications that you meet whatever criteria that they might have, right? Whether they look for a credit score above some number, or they want X amount of salary in your bank account, or X amount of money in your bank account. So I believe that starts getting really powerful, and that's definitely one of the areas of interest that we're seeing from DeFi applications that we talk to. The second one is just cool new stuff that hackers hack together. And here, this is where I believe I'm not smart enough. Again, Dark Forest, people say it's like this art piece, right? Where again, I'm not even smart enough to play Dark Forest because I can't write algorithms. But there's going to be, I think, interesting new things that most of us can't think of before, because this is such a fundamentally primitive technology. And I'm aware this is a bit of a cop-out answer, but these things happen with fundamentally new properties, again, such as what happened with the internet, computers before it, smart contracts. I believe zero knowledge is at the same level. So there's going to be some really exciting new stuff. We hope we have a piece with the SDK Snarky.js to make it easy to hack together. But if it's not us, via some of the other alternatives, that's going to happen, I believe.
Another question here as well.
Hello, I have a question. We like Mina's proof system, the Kimchi, and we like the Snark.js SDK to develop Snarks with ZK apps. But how we can use this proof entirely? I know it's in your bridge it's in your roadmap to make a bridge, but how we can interact directly without any bridging? So in other chains, in layers,
Yep.
do you plan to open your proof system to other chains, or just keep layer one?
Yep. I mean, it is open. It's open source, right? But we actually are looking at, number one, making Snarky.js work, which is, again, the SDK that we have, such that it doesn't auto-deploy onto Mina. You can use it peer-to-peer, basically, either without deploying to on any chain or sending the proofs to any other chain. The issue there is, take Ethereum. Ethereum has curves or precompiled opcodes for certain curves and certain proof systems. One of them being Groth16. So Groth16 has other trade-offs. We used to use Groth16, for example. We moved away from it to some mesh between Plonk and Halo 2 and a bunch of other things. So if you deploy it to Ethereum right now, it's going to be very expensive. So it's basically not usable. You can do it, but it's not usable. And there, I believe the Mina Foundation is working with the Ethereum Foundation and others to basically enable efficient and cheap verification of whether it's our proofs or more, I think what's going to be better for the industry is a family of proofs. And if there's folks from any layer 2 projects here, they might be more aware of this than I am, such that Ethereum becomes efficient to verify these families of more modern proof systems. But even if that doesn't happen, the way we see from a vantage point of proof systems where Mina is positioned is, at the end of the day, I think one of the VCs has a good articulation of this. The Web3 space is in the business of selling block space, right? This is like decentralized computation, right? And the analogy I like to use is this is like computer architecture where in computers you have a bunch of chips, right? You have your CPU, GPU, memory chips, yada yada. They're all optimized for something else. Your CPU isn't great at processing graphics power. And I believe the same thing may happen in the blockchain space where there will be block spaces optimized for different things. Like Ethereum is optimized for the most decentralized, trustworthy, general purpose computation logic. And I believe zero knowledge, there's going to be zero knowledge optimized block spaces or blockchains as well. And that's how we see Mina. Mina being like a blockchain that's optimized for zero knowledge. May not be great or better than other alternatives for general purpose computation. But it's like a GPU equivalent for zero knowledge in the blockchain space. That's pushing the analogy a bit too far. So thanks for bearing with me. But long story short, yes, we want to see it enabled in other places, on other chains, but it's ultimately not just about us, it's also about the other layer 1 ecosystems if they want to invest resources into making it cheap.
Time for one more question.
So yeah, ZK is a powerful tool and we know it and we are excited for that, but not everyone might be excited for that. So do you have maybe any insights on how the stance of institutions or maybe like states over this? Because we had the cryptography wars a couple of years ago. Now it seems to be coming up again. So not all of these states are happy with what's private.
Yeah.
And there's a obvious conflict there. So do you have any insights how it's going to play?
Not super deep, but it's a great question, by the way. We did have and keep having conversations with certain regulatory bodies in the US or elsewhere. And what I'm sensing from those conversations is, and again, this isn't at the end of the day when it's regulatory, it's politics as well, right? So that impacts a lot of things. But at least on a staff level, those institutions do want to see technologies that prevent data liability, because I believe Vitalik is the one that coined that term. Data liability is a thing now where companies, startups want to provide a service without having to store all this data, because then there's data breaches and they're effed, right? It messes up their business. So if it enables companies and the entire an entire economy to function to provide these value-add services without everyone's private data being all around, then I think it's in the interest of countries and economies. And that's the sense we got from, again, a small handful of conversations we had with certain regulatory bodies, as well as certain companies as well. They want to see this too. But again, it's politics at the end of the day. I think it depends. But I hope people will see that ZK can actually make things a lot more smooth and efficient.
Thank you. I know people have a lot of questions for Emre, but I'm afraid we've run out of time, so you'll just have to pounce on him when he's having a coffee later. Thank you once again.
Thanks, Errol. Thank you all. Bir de şey vardı.